Outlawed Thoughts, episode 62. I'm here with a different sort of guest, a special guest. So, sort of introing you, Jeremy, your sort of backstory, I guess, and everything. We'll get into that here in a second. But I sort of introed this on Twitter, I think, very well by sort of talking about some of the Alaska politics stuff with most of the people who watch the show. Um, you are. I'm sorry, I'm just blanking here for a moment. I lost my place because I was dealing with Twitter, and I'm trying to like
Yeah,
figure out
yeah.
everything. So re-introing that. I'm here with Jeremy Cubas. You're the what was your actual title? I'm
So for
trying to bring
long,
up the headline for
yeah,
you for
yeah.
my
So my
prep.
long-term title was simply the photographer and video production manager.
Okay, so I see this was the struggle when I tried to find what your like, because this was what I wanted to do. I have
Yeah,
like a notepad and I got some basic info and stuff, and I have three question marks
yeah,
there because I found four different things in all these different media publications, which we're gonna get into
yeah,
that shit show, of course, briefly.
yeah.
What I will say is, go ahead and talk about, I guess, what has happened over the last 2 days. Intro yourself
Hmm.
as like, who you are and what you kind of stand for and that kind of side of things. Because I don't know
Yeah.
how many of the people that will eventually listen to this are kind of familiar with you and
Right. Yeah, yeah.
your world. You're in Alaska too. That's something that
Yes.
everybody will not be used to. I don't think I think you're the only guest I've had on the show that's also in this neck of the woods. So
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And so I'm Jeremy Cubas, and so uh, I mean, for a long time, I've done many different things just in my life, and so I was a college professor for a while. I own a business for a long time and everything, but the last year I got a gig working for the governor, and it just started out with doing video production and photography. The governor found out about my background with my higher education, getting the two masters and finishing the doctoral coursework and everything. And I was professor, and so he figured that I'll be good in terms of the policy advising as well. And so just for 2 weeks, he assigned me to be a policy advisor for a new office that he put in there, which is the Office of Family and Life. And really during that time, I was just working on the website. I mean I was only there for 2 weeks, right? And so there wasn't much else besides that. It was a website, and I went to a dinner to talk to a local group that advocates like for pro-life stuff and everything.
right.
And so yeah, I went to that, and that was really the extent of that stint. So for the most part, I was just doing all the live streams, all the photos, traveling, and so on and so forth. So that was pretty much my main duties while I was there.
Well, that's I myself am pro-life, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
At least you got one dinner in, I suppose. But
Yes.
it is an interesting thing. So to put this into some perspective, coming from Alaska, you're familiar with this sort of thing. You guys said a quote on your a statement on your show last
Hmm.
night, which I listened to, which everybody else should go. Which actually
Yeah, I forgot to
contra.
introduce that part, but yeah.
What is the contra gentilis, or what
Yeah,
is
so
the?
it's Latin contra gentiles,
Okay,
and it
see,
just
I would have
means
had to have asked my grandma. She studied religion, and she's the Latin.
yes, yeah.
She's that's
It
her.
was it was named after one of the seminal works of Aquinas. So his two biggest
Okay,
bodies of work was
okay.
Summa Theologica. I think most people know that, or Summa Theologiae with some of the translations, and Summa Contra Gentiles.
Mm,
And so the Contra Gentiles documents were mostly geared for attacking the ideas of of his contemporary time,
right.
because around the 1100s and the 1200s there were other philosophical movements that started to really boom, and it actually kind of was taken from the I call them Mohammedans, but we could say Islamic uh,
I was
world.
gonna say he wrote, because I've read some stuff that he wrote as
Mhm.
far as the Islamic stuff that's spot on. It's like
Yes, yeah, yeah.
it's great.
and and um And so a lot of the Islamic, I guess, intellectuals, and many people know, like they had 300-year golden period where they developed a lot of math, a lot of philosophy, and everything that was actually quite helpful for the Western world.
And
But
artwork. Like that
yes,
period
yeah,
brought some amazing artwork stuff. I'm into like random like sort of old world stuff
yes, yeah.
and that like that period of artwork and stuff that came out of there, and then you like learn that like, oh, you guys were like producing smart people and like
Yes, yeah,
intelligent like
yeah,
thinkers.
yeah. It's really interesting. So, like Avicenna or Ibn I guess we're within the Arabic language, the Hebrew language, whatever is how you say it. But he's the one that kind of made huge commentaries on Aristotle's work. Al-Farabi, the kind of understood him as like the master and so on and so forth. So whenever you read Aquinas, he references him as like the teacher, the master, the philosopher. And so you kind of have to know the background of what he's referencing to. But what kind of ended up happening in the Islamic world was um, the main distinction. Just his, I just want to give a quick history on this. I hope you don't mind.
Oh,
But
you're fine.
the main distinction was that the Islamic world, like the Jewish world, was a lot of it was based on the book, right? And so it's like based on the Jewish world was based on the Torah. The Islamic world was based on the Quran and the Hadith and everything. And so that was like the development of it. The difference that of Christianity, whether one likes Christianity or not, that's besides the point. But the main difference was that they existed about 394 years without compiling of the canon book of what we understand the Bible to be. And so so there was a lot of tradition that existed prior to the formation of the Bible, and so the Christian faith, which ultimately is the Catholic and the Orthodox faith, both have the same tradition, is that there was a heavy focus on many of the early fathers, the same way that the United States has founding fathers. There's church fathers. They call them the patristics, and so the church fathers had a lot of writings in which they understood as being correct. And so the development of the Christian world was different than that of the Islamic world. And so what happened with like Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina and many of these great teachers in the Islamic world is that they couldn't reconcile their findings, their intellectual findings with the Quran and the Hadith. And because of that, they constructed a philosophy where they said there's two truths. There's truths of faith, and then there's truths of the intellect. And so that's really what Aquinas was dealing with in his time. And so many of the academics, many of the scholars that were in, where he was a professor at the University of Paris, many of them were adopting this point of view, is that you have truths of faith and you have truths of reason. And so in that time, he wanted to rail against that idea. And so like the Contra Gentiles was railing against the idea that there's true truths. He says there's only one truth. And the one truth has to be reconciled within reason. And if it's not reconciled within reason, we have to basically throw it out, that it cannot be true. And that was much of his major work. And so our podcast was pretty much founded with that idea. And so when we look at our contemporary world now, we also do have this almost dualistic view of reality, right? And so many of the secularists have an idea that there is not only just two truths, but there's like an infinite amount of truths. They're just personal truths. And so personal truths are not really guided by any universal principle, but all things are merely subjective, and all things are equivocal based on your truth, his truth, her truth, and so on and so forth. And so part of our mission of the podcast is really to attack that idea. That's what we called it, Contra Gentiles, because we are against the contemporary world. And that we want to again say, that no, there's only one truth. And that one truth ought to be discovered through reason. And if it is not discovered through reason, it cannot be held as true.
Well, I think it's an interesting sort of outlook on things, and I listened to that most recent episode. I went back and listened to one of the later episodes sort of randomly.
Yeah.
I saw how I came across your whole situation. Funny enough, was Pete Quinones,
Yeah.
who had me blocked for a while on Twitter. I don't know how I got unblocked. It's somewhere along the lines.
Yeah, yeah,
Me and him had a squabble a while ago. It was petty shit,
yeah,
of course, but
yeah,
just
yeah.
Twitter crap. But anyway, I saw him retweet some stuff about your situation, so I started reading, realized, oh wait, this has to do with Alaska, because I'm normally pretty quick on those stories, realized what was going on. So I had put up a tweet, and I was like, my main thing was I saw that, with everything that happened, obviously this so we can briefly, I'll just briefly cover this because it's pretty simple. I mean, really, from what I can understand, once Dunleavy put you in some other position, right?
Yeah.
You said you were there for 2 weeks. Then you go on some media guys' radars. Of course, those media people have to be the same scum piece of shit who I see running hit pieces and stories against all the people I like in Alaska.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. I don't really trust these people. I hate the media in general. So
Yes. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it is what it is. But they see that you get some sort of status or some higher status, whatever they perceive it as,
Yeah.
and immediately form up some articles based around your podcast. Obviously, some choice quotes that they picked out, which I think you guys attacked pretty much one by one on your show, which I think was perfect.
Hmm.
I think it's a perfect example of what I think a lot of people are going to face in the future, going into
Yeah.
sort of this new political age. And so I think it's important to sort of talk about it when we are looking at something like this. You guys mentioned on your episode, you said this is big for Alaska,
Yeah.
or Alaskan big. That was what it was. It was
Yeah.
Alaskan
Yeah.
big. And I was like, I'm going to use that phrase all the time now because that's really what this was. But it's sort of in this power vacuum of what Alaskan politics can ever really become, because there's only a certain number of eyes that really it can aggregate. And what I think it's a perfect example of is what's going to be happening everywhere else. Like,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
like
yes, definitely.
you're going to see, you know, a city council member or somebody local
Hmm.
to a community run. The second they do, you've got these hit pieces drafted, you've got stuff going out, basically forcing them into a position, and I understand I think you put the best response you could out. I think that was perfect. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it falls right in line with this sort of like, just fuck these people. Like, you kind of like, you 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 know what you did. Like, none of
Oh,
you
yeah.
know you were disingenuous,
Yeah.
pieces of shit about it. My point of view is, anyway, it's sort of like this the push and pull of the media here in Alaska. It's funny. I was just on Twitter sort of ranting about this recently because Max Blumenthal was running up to Rachel Maddow
Right.
face
Yeah. I saw
mounting
that.
at the podium and yelling at her and stuff. And in my Joe Vogler documentary, the thing that people know me for sort of on the channel is I show a clip of Max Blumenthal
Mm.
back in 2008 when John McCain was running. And what is he doing? Well,
Oh.
he's on Rachel Maddow's show trashing not Sarah Palin, but trashing Joe Vogler and the AIP, which had nothing to really do with Palin to the degree that they were claiming. They also claimed that
Right.
Vogler was tied with the Lost Cause movement and a bunch of other horse shit that was like,
Yes. Yeah.
well, I have this recording of him saying the opposite of that. So it's like,
Yeah.
and if you had done the medium bit of even a crumb of research, you could have found that, because it took me all of, a few weeks of like digging around the
Of
internet.
course. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
when I see this stuff, and to me, Blumenthal's a perfect example of one of those media types. It's like somebody who will slink back in and now like be accepted into all these groups. It's like, this guy was like a piece of shit just like 6 years, 7 years ago. Like, this isn't even that long ago. Like, you guys are
Right. Yeah.
buying this. Like, like, it's like Rachel Maddow could put on a long-haired wig and just blend right back in and everybody would accept her. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
sorry. Like, uh So I see what happened to you as sort of the future of politics on a wide scale, and it is
Yeah.
what it is it's scary, but in a way it's sort of funny. And I mean
Yeah.
this in the most sort of twisted way, because what's going to happen, and this is just it's just bound to take place, is
Yeah.
eventually everybody in politics is going to be canceling everybody in politics, both on the left and right, for the smallest infractions possible,
Right.
until it's meaningless again. And we're
Yes.
right
Yeah.
back to where we started. And what did
Yes. Yeah.
any of this do?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you there. I think the more that they do it, it's just the more meaningless it's going to happen. And I think the more the younger the politicians become, the more online shit people are going to find. And I think that that's what's going to happen, is that everybody, you know, have been in some way interacting online, whether it's going to be through social media or a lot of people doing podcasts or whatever. And so, I think down the future, you're just going to see more and more people getting, I don't know,
Well, what's
attempted
funny
counsel
is
for what they have said.
too is like I've been to a lot of public events in the libertarian space, so a lot of like, conventions, or Tom
Yeah.
Woods puts on a thing or something along those lines, like. And it's funny, it's like people, once you get around them in person, like this idea of quote cancel culture is absolutely fucking meaningless. Like, and I mean that for even. Oh, by the way, garbage main's in the chat. This is, I gotta point this out. Everyone in politics will be saying the N word. Yeah, I mean it is sort of. I mean it is a joke, but it is sort of true in a fact where that's going to
Yeah.
happen at some point. Like people don't realize, like these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, which
Yeah.
are going through the college system, things like that. Now, I know a lot of people have a black pill on the whole like young kids growing up, but I actually see it as a bit of an opposite. I'm 23. Most
Yeah.
people assume I'm like a little bit older, so I get sort of put in this other bracket, but the reality is like most of the people I know who are like 3, 4 years younger than me, they're gonna be just fine. Like
Yeah.
they're saying shit that if their parents heard them saying, they would be running up the walls. So
Right. Yeah.
it's what happens is like, and I think anybody who understands culture to a degree will get this, and I do still think that politics like is sort of molded by this in a sense. It's like if the people are being told not to say things and you're
Mhm.
14, 15, 16, you're going to say all those things.
Oh
And so
yes.
it's
Yeah.
like you're going to create a generation that moves into the political field that hates your ideology, that wants
Yes.
to just not just destroy it, but take a flamethrower to it. So
Right.
it's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
it's sort of like I see it, I see people saying the left is making their own worst enemy, the right's making their worst own enemy. It's like I kind of think you're both creating a giant shit golem that's gonna like eat you all.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it's kind of like it's sort of dogmatic in a sense. Like you're
Yeah.
all you're all kind of just sewing your own AIDS quilt. Like, like
Yeah. I 100% agree. Yeah, because even for my generation, it was already pretty unbearable, the amount of things that they say that you cannot say. And just coming from, my parents immigrated here from Peru, right? And so there was always like this idea, being raised, that they struggled to get here. It wasn't easy for them, and they come here with all the promises that the United States really stands for. And so I've always just been kind of taught from my parents from a young age that, you know we do have the freedom, the ability to say things, at least through conversation, and to really express ideas, and not really take shit from anyone. And so it's been like that's really been my entire life. I've gotten in trouble since I was like in grade school for not listening, to what ought to be said or what ought not to be said. And the more that they tell me not to say something, the more I want to say it. And that's really where a lot of maybe my insanity comes from. It's just that I don't care, and I think it's whether one is like a free speech absolutist or not. I think most people would say we should have the ability to say what is true.
Yeah,
Um,
I absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
I've had even people I know, like, sort of in my own circle personally, like IRL, be like,
yeah,
hey, don't you think, like, doing podcasts, doing stuff like that, talking about stuff. I made clips for Tower Gang, which is a group on Twitter. But everything's connected to my name.
yeah,
My name is Leighton Radner. Like, that is my legal name. My full name is Leighton Keepa Radner. Like,
yeah,
I don't hide that. But the reasoning behind that is because I didn't really have a choice. I got doxxed when I was like 16, so it's like it's sort of hard to, like, keep your identity safe on the
right,
internet when you're already sort of public at a younger age. So it's like you can't really do that. So my name was out there. It's like that is what it is, and you go, well, I ran for city council down here in Seward like a little while ago, mainly just because I wanted to publicly berate a lot of the people who were screwing things up down here, which I do.
yeah,
But that whole thing was, you know, you sort of see how the media sort of works in that range, not really in like papers and stuff, but just because we're in such a small town, it's like stuff just travels here by word. So all of a sudden you're getting back all these stories that didn't happen, things that didn't really take place, and it's really just people spreading shit. It's like that.
yeah,
You get it on an even larger scale because you have the actual media doing that exact thing. So it's like it's basically taking the banter of, like, housewives, divorced women, and men who can't get laid talking in bars
yes,
and amplifying it to the newspaper and fucking headlines that you read on a daily basis if you live in the state. And it's like,
yeah,
I want you, like, individually all to choke on, like, come to death. Like, I don't, like, I have zero sympathy for these types of people, like, personally. Like, I'm like, to me, it's like life ruination shit. Like,
yeah,
it's sort of the internet motto that I think a lot of people in my generation kind of came out of, where it's like, listen, you don't, like, you you can attack somebody on the internet, attack somebody because of their opinion, attack somebody because of what they believe in. I don't care. Like, that's
hmm,
fair game. But you
yeah,
try to ruin somebody's livelihood, you try to ruin somebody's lives. Like on YouTube, this is an example in the, like, copyright strike system. Like,
yeah,
YouTubers, like, that is the thing they protect. You start copyright striking somebody frivolously, they start, it's an uproar. Like, the community will
yeah,
get behind people because it's sort of the self-policing that goes on. But in the media, that just doesn't exist, because in most cases, I think it's just a money sum game where it's like, this
yeah.
gets clicks and it screws somebody over. Who cares?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I
I
agree.
I
And
just
I do think there's some kind of oversight that at least within the formation of the country, with the media. I think the idea was kind of just not taking into consideration actual human nature. And so I think they kind of figured that the media will always be seeking truth. And so they have absolutely no checks. Well, with all the talk of checks and balances with the American system, the media has no checks at all. There's nothing really that stops them from saying and doing what they want. If they align themselves with one or the other party, doesn't matter which one it is, they become an extended branch of that party without any checks or balances.
right.
And so they could kind of manipulate the way that the message is sent out, and they begin to control the information, so on and so forth. So there is a bit of an oversight, I think, in comprehending that. At least from the original founding documents, that no, there's giving the media free range that way, it seems a bit foolish. In hindsight, it's like you to assume that they're just going to be people seeking truth as opposed to people who are trying to, I guess, grow or facilitate the political party and agenda, is like, well, that's dumb, because now it all goes out the window. And when information is like key, especially for this type of system, because we don't live in a system where me pounding somebody's in the face and shooting them and slitting their throat gains me power. It puts me in prison, right? If we were like in a more barbaric system where that just meant I conquer, I win, I'm victorious, then that's fine, and then the journalists can have all the power that they want. But I can't do that. I can't go to any of these places and just gain power through brute force anymore. You have to manipulate and work around the system, and I think the people that have absolutely no boundaries really is the media, and I think that's pretty bad, because what can you really, you can't do anything about it really.
Well, I think, as a if I were to say, here's my like take as somebody going, okay, what's the most realistic thing I can see to do to actually rile that in? I would say to really alter the way that our country views legally defamation, which I think is
Yeah.
something our country has frivolously gotten wrong.
Yes.
And I think, a lot of lawyers, if they really actually, there's you get a mix of this, but I watch a lot of legal content on the internet, and I do
Mhm.
have contacts with a few internet lawyers, people along those
Yeah.
lines, and it's like, once you talk to most of these people about it, they're all on the same boat. Like, they all agree that the way the law is written and the way that it's practiced are completely opposite to each other. Like, the
Yeah.
the idea that a public figure can just be called a Nazi or
Right.
called a child molester, some very horrible fucking things that, I mean, just historically in the last 20 years, like, just take
Yeah.
that window of time. Some of the things we've seen politicians or public figures in general, celebrities, you know, think about just things like People magazine, like
Right.
shit that will put a celebrity on the front page of their magazine, make a completely made up headline, and claim that this is just fact. And
Hmm.
yes, sure, some people buy the magazine, they look through the book, and they realize that the story really isn't true, or there's some fragility to it. But in reality, like, people are seeing that headline. They're seeing the front page of the magazine as they're checking out at the store. They're seeing it as they're walking by a news counter, or they're seeing it
Yes.
scrolling through the internet. So it's like, it just becomes the prevailing thing. And so being called a Nazi is an endorsement. Well, Andy, this is dependent on who you have as family. If I say that publicly, I think I get beat to death. I think that's how it works. So I have to be. But has Jeremy had any journo homos come to his house or call him personally? How has he dealt with them so far? So I know you got one call at least,
Hmm.
because you had the
Yeah.
50-minute an hour call with
Yeah. Yeah. Which he didn't include really at all in the article, which is pretty
I
irritating.
noticed that.
It's like fuck. Why did you call me then? Um, I did actually. I did get another call, and I don't know whether it's going to happen, so I don't want to give too much information. But most likely tomorrow there will be something happening, and so for me it's I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. Should I engage? Should I make it bigger deal? My first instinct is yes, because I'm kind of hard headed to the point that I don't want anybody else to have the last word but me. And so I'm gonna go down with it as long as I have the last word. I'll be okay with it, even if it makes things worse. I just don't care, because if I get the last word, I fucking win, and
Dude,
that's the way that.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Like, that's, to me, that's the outlook to have on this shit, cuz it's like,
Yeah.
all of this, from a historical standpoint, all of this shit is going to be looked at as funny, laughable crap.
Yes.
It's going to be
Exactly.
just sawdust in the mill. Like, it's
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
it is such a shit show that what is basically a collection of out of context quotes becomes this fervor and movement of, and you go on Twitter and you read these replies, and it's like, oh god, you guys are just uh um I did go back and forth, and I will mention this too,
Mhm.
because I do. This person follows me back, and we followed each other for a while. That's why I entertained the conversation. They brought up a bill. I think it was Bill 62 or 64, something
Mm,
along those lines, having to do with marriage stuff.
yeah.
Now, I, on the front end of it, looked up what the vote was for. And it wasn't for what had originally been told to me, which was that it was,
Mm.
well, it's about the age of marriage. And I'm like, okay. But then when I Googled it, that's not what it was originally about. It was actually originally about the number of witnesses you had to have present to call it a marriage, and
Oh,
then
okay.
they tacked on
The
something
age.
to do with the age stuff on there after
Yeah.
the fact. They took offense with the way you voted. The way I read it, it was really sort of didn't really matter either way to me. Like, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
So that's just my basic take.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm kind of confused about it because I'm not too familiar with what bill they're really talking about.
Yeah.
A-
And I
and
had a
s-
feeling that was going to be the answer, because when you're talking
yeah,
about the minutia of this political shit, it gets to be sort of trivial.
right, yeah. I normally just read like when I go into voting, I just read what the description they give us, and so whatever that description said is probably what I base it off of. But I know, but I guess I don't know what like was this something that was in the election like for people to vote on because I'm not a legislator. I don't.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I found brutally confusing about the way that they were saying it. It was
yeah,
almost as though maybe it was something you supported or said something about. It didn't make sense to me, but I felt as
yeah,
though because the person has followed me for a while, I was like, okay, I'll say
yeah,
it. But
yeah, yeah,
I had already, I mean, I went back probably 9 or 10 replies back and forth with this person,
yeah.
basically laying out why I thought what they were saying was sort of horseshit. So
Yeah,
I don't
I
want
don't.
to like,
I did see that post too, and I personally was confused, so I didn't really respond back. So I don't know what they're talking about.
yeah, and
Um,
yeah, like I said, it was
yeah,
more of a thing where I went back and forth. I had my 2 cents, and that was my take. But
yeah,
it was confusing to me because I'm going, "What, you're saying he's voting on something?" I'm like, I've seen four different. I said earlier in the show, right? I had
yeah,
3 question marks for what your actual your appointed title was, and so I'm
yeah,
going like, you're saying he's voting on something. I have 4 things here, none of them vote. Like,
yes, yeah. I
so
don't.
I'm confused. Like,
Yeah, I think he must have confused me with someone else, maybe.
yeah, it has to be something
Yeah,
like that. And
because they were calling that other guy a Nazi. What's his name?
the redhead or sort of
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, so I shared a clip of that guy,
yeah.
which I don't know. Some people might disagree with my take, but I got sort of perturbed by the one statement he said where
Hmm.
he was like talking to the guy about, well, if they're like dead, it's sort of better because it's cheaper. And now there were
Right.
2 ways to take that, and it
Yeah.
was either as a jab towards the guy he was talking to,
Mm.
right? Like,
David
oh,
Eastman,
well,
right? I think that's his name. I'm
David
sorry.
Eastman.
Yeah, yeah,
That's it.
yeah, yeah.
That's it. You're 100% right. So it was, it was sort of either, to me, it was 2 ways I could take it. It's uh, either you're saying it's better if this happens to this guy because you want to sort of give a jab at their organization and what they're doing, which I would have been fine with.
Yeah.
But in the aftermath, it almost seemed like he kind of stood by the statement. I'm like, I wouldn't have, like, I don't know if I would have done it that way. Like,
Yeah.
I
Right. Yeah. I do think there's like,
but I have some sympathy for that guy too, because he gets lambasted all the time for
oh
things that
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
me
are
too.
basic, regular conservative takes.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I think my main problem is that even if I disagree with someone, so if somebody is just talking to me and they're like saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't think you Latinos need to come anymore. You know that your parents were wrong for crossing the border. That we have to keep American jobs with Americans, and that you and your people need to go back." I wouldn't really get mad because it's like why would I get mad over somebody's opinion about something, especially if they're discussing with it to me and they're giving me their rational take on it. My response would be to give also my rational take to theirs. Like my response wouldn't be like get him out of office. I'm like, why would I care? If he is talking about something and he has his reasons for it, let him talk. I don't care if it's fucking David Duke coming through the door. I don't care who it is. You want to talk about something, then talk. The the problem that I see in most cases is that people just want to be outraged. It's like this desire to just be offended, and I think the desire to be offended they find fulfilled whenever somebody says something that might, I guess, qualify as something that they feel particularly justified to be offended over. And I think when you do that, you really do produce more anger, more animosity. When you tell people that they cannot express things, I think that we need to be able to have conversations, no matter how outrageous it might seem at first. We ought to have certain conversations, and if one is not able to defend their position through reason, then I think it is their fault. Not the fault of the one who is saying something that might sound extreme. So when I see David Eastman, there might be many things I disagree with him on. I still think if he won the election, he needs to hold office. He shouldn't just be kicked out because of it. He might say, many outrageous things, many things that I might disagree with, or maybe if he explained to me further, I would agree with him. I don't know. I don't have that conversation, but the problem is that he's not allowed to have the conversation. It's like the moment he says a statement, it's like they want to shut it off and be like, no, that is wrong. You're a Nazi sympathizer. You're this and that. And it's like, no, whoa. It's like, let's take a step back. And first, let's hear it out. If he actually has something based on logic and reason, and I really do think that's what's important. When somebody's just yelling and foaming from the mouth and just like seeming possessed, it's like that's different. They're not having a conversation. They're just yelling. And we wanted
an example of that. Recently, I don't know if you saw that. Did you see recently the Thomas Massey being screamed at about
yes
control when he was in the house? And I was like, that's a perfect example of that. Where if you take just the subtitles, right? If you just sat there with a keyboard and typed out what these two people are saying, Thomas Massey bent him over and just fucked him in front of all the cameras. And no one knows it because there's just this dude screaming, frothing at the mouth.
Yes,
like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the things that we defend as freedom of speech is just dumb. People just yelling and we say that's freedom of speech, but people discussing a topic is not. It's like that's literally the opposite. I would think what the founding fathers intended it to be. When they're talking about when they talk about freedom of speech, they're not talking about just people yelling. They're talking about the ability to converse ideas. And the only way we could get at truth is by the attempt to come up with good deduction or inductive arguments to get the conclusion that is proper. And many times we may fail at that. There's many times where I'm trying to get at the truth and my arguments do not hold up to scrutiny. And then I'm like, okay, well, then I guess that was a bad conclusion I formulated first. But you can't get there if you're not allowed to discuss, if you're not allowed to formulate these arguments. I don't think it should be at all proper just to yell, to protest, to throw things, to just hold up signs. Like that's not speech. That's just like animal barking. That's literally the same as a dog just going when he sees another dog on the other side and he just wants to attack him.
It's territorial in a sense too, because it's drawn in the political line. So it's like it's like Democrats are always going to bark at Republicans are always going to bark at Democrats. In a way, libertarians are always going to bark at everybody, and you're always going to have this sort of circular logic. And that's sort of, I mean, like recently, becoming more of a, like, for instance, I wrote a piece about Nick Begich and Hale Boggs.
Okay.
Before that, I did the Vogler thing, turning the articles into documentaries as I go.
Nice.
But, Vogler is somebody I consider to be like a political hero of mine, but he had opinions I disagree with. Like, there are libertarian figures I absolutely, revere that I'm like, yeah, but you had some takes I don't like. Like, it doesn't like...
Yes, yeah.
Me, I think, part of being intellectually principled is being able
Hmm.
to take sort of the best parts and the ideas that actually work and kind of, again, using logic and reason to sparse out the ones that don't fit. And I
Yeah.
think that we've lost that certainly in politics in a national sense, but I think more than that we've lost it in a way in like areas of Alaska. Like it's weird because you know there's Anchorage and there's Juneau and there's Fairbanks, and they sort of operate in their own like world, and then the
Yeah.
Kenai Peninsula is like a shit show. It's like, and being that I live over here, it's like I'm like this place is like falling apart. Like, and it's not the fault of the state government. It just isn't. It's the fault of the
Mm.
local governments. The
Yeah.
city
That's
council in
interesting.
Seward is trash. They've zoned out growth, so the town is stagnated, and they're getting to a
Yeah.
position now where they're going broke. And so they tried to sell off the city utilities, like
Oh,
the
damn.
city power like contracts, tried to give them over to Homer, and that was stopped by like literally when I say stopped, I mean it was 8 votes or something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that was the separating line. And it's sort of like this situation down here where I realize like you know again going back to Vogler stuff. When I talk about his sort of thing, I'm like this sort of independence movement idea and how it spread across the state. That's what I'm more interested in, is really
Hmm.
sort of how the whole thing operated. I really do think Alaska's at a period where if we don't have another sort of freedom bringing movement like that, whether
Hmm.
it's in culture or politics, we're kind of just fucked. like,
Yeah, I
like
agree with you. Yeah.
we're just sort of riding the rails till the whole fucking train falls apart. Like
Yeah.
there's no like there's no fucking shovel at the end of the hole. Like we have no there's no
Right.
way to
Yeah.
get out of it. And at this point you can pretty much elect whoever you want. It's not going to be and I in a way I'll say Dunleavy's sort of evidence this, right? Like
Yeah.
Dunleavy's done a lot of great things. He's done a lot of things I agree with. But
Yes.
he's still sort of in a way powerless to the larger system that's built around him, right?
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and this is something that's been realized by I think most of the people who come to be in charge of the state. Like
Yeah.
pretty much all of them have bowed down to like the national political system and sort of just died out.
Hmm.
um I think I don't know. I don't think the Libertarian Party is doing enough here, and I think it has obviously, a lot of people don't realize, but like the LP's history is in Alaska. Like the
Yeah.
some of the like the first candidates who held office as libertarians were in this state. Like, and people just sort of forgot that. Like the lifeblood sort of gone there. So I think I would really love to see some sort of new independence movement, new sort of Alaskan nationalism sort of esque movement come
Yeah.
forward. But I think almost every state needs that at this point. Like that's
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
the only thing keeping us from a complete like nosedive off the cliff. Like I'm like, if you could at least get some contingent of people in each state to realize this is stupid, you might be a lot better off.
Yeah.
You but that's a pretty difficult thing to try to get through to people with. That's sort of where I was coming from when I made the documentary. I mentioned before the show, I was like, and I've said this on the show before, but when I Googled Joe Vogler, when I looked up the name, I was like, there's like 3 entries, 4 entries that actually pertained to like his story or who he was. And so that was why I decided to do it. With the Nick Begich, Hale Boggs thing, it was a bit different. I decided to make that just because I feel like so many people in politics don't touch that story because it
Yeah.
involves so many people who are still in politics. But it's like
Right.
no one else finds it weird that like Peggy Begich married a guy who like murdered people for the mafia. Like I think that's a bit weird. Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
like I think that's a bit odd. Like, and then you're like, well, you said it. Now you're a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, well, it happened. Like, they were married for 2 years. She went to Arizona. Like, we have all the
Right.
paperwork. So it's like, there's some people out there who go off in the leery end and throw out like more of the hoopla alien shit. That's what I really hate about this state. Is it's people
Right, I
throwing
know,
out
yeah.
stuff to the paranormal stuff, and I'm like, you understand that the entire military has been using this place as a testing field since the fucking 30s. Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna see some weird shit in the sky. Like, I don't know.
Right, yeah.
And there's
Yeah,
also like the whole magnetism thing, which is weird in the state. Like my family's been here for in Alaska going back to 70s in that era, and it's like, yeah, there
yeah.
was always sort of old pilots, everybody always talked about the fact that there was like you got into places in the state and there would be these weird magnetisms that would throw off your tracking systems or your flight
Right,
navs and stuff
yeah.
like that. And it's like, yeah, so the idea of like people going missing, people crashing, things like that is obviously makes sense. It's just like it is sort of weird that there's all these sort of coincidences around this one like death, which is sort
Yeah.
of which is where I came to the Vogler stuff too with that documentary, was because I sort of was doing sort of just a take on what Vogler's life was at first, and then when I started getting into the details of like, so I get Manfred West like killed this guy, he's in prison, the whole 9 yards. Like I even know somebody who was a prison guard at the prison Manfred West was in for like 9 years. So they got to
Wow.
spend a lot of time around the guy. So I got to talk to people who had sort of firsthand knowledge of him. And as I started sort of unraveling this, I'm like, if this guy did this, he has to be the dumbest and best criminal that's ever existed on the planet. Like,
Yeah.
Jack Coghill put it best when they were interviewing him later on in his life, and he's like, "Yeah, this was the cleanest extraction like that I've like anybody in the state had ever witnessed. Like the guy just, if this was the way this guy claims it happened, or the way the cops claimed it happened, there would have to be some evidence of it." Like, it's
Yeah.
like, and instead you end up with like, well, the cops like went to the house and didn't find anything. It's sort of weird if you haven't watched any of the stuff on it, but it's a wild like story when you lay all the stuff out. I was just like, this doesn't make any sense from like just going motive and reason and all that kind of stuff that you put into like why you would do these things. And I'm like, it just isn't there. Like, and
Yeah.
I never planned on getting into like true crime stuff, and I only did because I've watched a lot of that content. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's sort of why I did a podcast in the first place, because I used to listen to them all the time. It's like I work long hours at night, and so it's like
Yeah.
throw
That's
on
what
the
you
shit
listen
in
to.
your earbud and go. So it's like,
Yeah.
but it's different in the political world. I'm gonna be spending some time in Florida, and I
Oh,
plan on
wow.
getting a bit more involved in their whole system over there.
Yeah.
And I've sort of told people this, but I'm gonna basically take some of the ideas from like the old way of building up grassroots stuff in early Alaska and take that to rural Florida.
Oh, okay.
Because the design of the politics there is almost identical, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. Like
Oh,
it's
okay.
eerily similar. Like you go
Yeah.
to these towns, and it's like, well, this is basically the same exact thing I've been like watching and dealing with for like 5 years now. So
Yeah.
it's not much different. Whereas I've been to other states, and it's like, you guys got a wonky way of doing things around here. Like, like, I do think it's that Alaska has just a simpler way of handling these things in a way. Um,
Hmm.
I grew up in Big Lake, Alaska. I don't know if you know that area at
Oh,
all, but
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I grew up over there, and like I didn't have like we I grew up in a very small cabin with four brothers, and
Hmm.
it was a 550 square foot one room cabin with
Wow.
7 people. So, I grew up like the old school, like,
That's amazing. Yeah.
out in the woods, like that kind of lifestyle. Now I'm in an apartment and I work for like a hotel and shit like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a bit of a different vibe, but it is weird sort of seeing how I never stepped foot in a public school.
Yeah.
I never had a formal education. I did homeschooling. I've read a lot.
Yeah.
So it was like if I could get a hold of a book about politics, philosophy, religion, that kind of stuff, it was like sort of everything. I was like flying through stuff, and that's sort of why I think I landed where I did, because I was like, I don't know, I sort of see whatever you want to brand it as. I hate this stuff, but like free market anarchism, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just sort of saw it as logical after a while, where I'm like, at the end of the day, even if this isn't reality, we all can understand this is like like this is better, right? And this is sort of where I was at, you know. And
Yeah.
now I've moved into telling people it's more of like, well, my view of politics is very much skewed on the state that I live in. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might live in Oregon or California or New York or Texas or Florida and have a very different way of making laws because your culture is different, your way of life is different. Whereas you come up here and it's like I tell people, culture in Alaska is typically like 20 years behind the rest of the lower 48, and that's a
Yeah.
good thing. You want it to
Yeah.
stay
Yeah.
that way. Because
Yes.
when
Yeah.
everybody was woke and canceling people, I was working in kitchens and working in places here in the state with guys who didn't give a fuck what you told them that you couldn't say. Like that wasn't
Yes.
that wasn't entering their heads. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, um, again, when I grew up where I did, it was like I absorbed media that was older. Like we
Yeah.
went
Yeah.
to this place called Bob's Mini Market in Big Lake,
Mm.
Alaska. That's where we
Yes.
rented all our movies. We would go there and get VHSs. Later, the guy had DVDs before Bob passed away. And I remember when that happened too. And I was like
Yeah.
14 when he died. And but that's where we got our movies. So our movies were stunted by like 10 years. Like
Right. Yeah.
there were very few new movies. Most of what you got was older. Like that's just how it
Yeah.
worked. So you didn't have this sort of new age, like mid 2000s media in my childhood. Like it just didn't exist. Like most of the stuff I
Yeah.
was watching was a little earlier than that, which I think worked out really well because like I love westerns. I love like epic movies, like not these like what's made now. And I think that's sort of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same way I became with reading and politics and education. I was like, I'm reading all this shit and realizing like, well, no, it's probably a good thing that I didn't go to public school because those guys
Oh
are
yeah.
supposed to be stupid. Like
Yeah.
it
No,
was
they
very
are.
early on as a kid that I was like, I know more than you do, and you're like 5 years older than me. Like,
Yeah.
and it became a sort of like where I was quoting like history facts and talking about
Yeah.
like ancient civilizations and like sea life and like random topics where I'd get on this, I call it kicks, but I'd get on a kick of like for 2 months I'd just learn about sea life. And
Yeah.
it's like once I had that in my head, it was sort of just there, and then I'd move on to the next topic, and like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's how my sort of education was. So that's where I got like my politics and all that from. Sort of came from that. It was like
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
sort of not caring about. You mentioned not caring about what other people say, and kind of think about what your beliefs are, and or to an
Yeah.
extent, it's like yeah, that's sort of the same ideals where it's like I mentioned when I ran for city council this idea of principle. Like I don't
Yeah.
care. My exact quote was, I don't care whether you're a Democrat, I don't care whether you're a Republican, I care whether you are principled. Because if you're principled, I at least know what your stance is and is going to be. But we
Yeah.
live in a world where that just doesn't matter anymore. Certainly not
Yeah.
politically.
Yeah.
Like
That's
it's
true. Yeah.
but I don't know. What do you think you've other than the media being scum? Is there
Yeah.
anything you took away from the experience? Any sort of and to the
From yeah.
question of JC here, does Jeremy plan to move? Are you gonna find
Uh,
somewhere other than Alaska?
at the moment, no. I plan on staying. Um. Yeah. I mean, the it's probably like mix of people responses of what happened. I think there's a lot of people that just ended up listening to the podcast and realizing that they were just fabricating everything,
Right.
or miscontextualizing it. And but there's also a lot of people that got pissed off, and so it's like I already have support. I already found another job, getting paid the same amount, so I'm
I
not
know you
really.
mentioned that on the show, and I
Yeah,
audibly chuckled while I was listening at like 2 a.m. I was like,
yeah,
ha ha
yes,
ha
yeah.
ha.
um yeah, I'm not. It's hard for people to stop me. I'm insane, and so I just keep going, and I find ways. You always find ways. um and so no, I plan on staying. I don't. It was the first time I ever really went into politics. My entire intellectual pursuits through college and through grad school and everything was actually always towards philosophy, um more than anything else. And so
It just sort of becomes that crossroads at some point, you know?
it does, yeah, yeah. And so when it became the crossroads, and I was in it, even before all this stuff happened, I wanted to get out. And part of the reason was because I was tired of, obviously I didn't do a very good job of it because I still speak freely, but I was tired of feeling like I couldn't just talk, and the problem with that is that I need to assert certain things that are true if the conversation happens. Like either like I said, many people there's only one mode of Jeremy. If you really see the way that I am this way everywhere. You hear the jokes on my podcast, you hear the gross things I could say, as well as the philosophical things I could say. That is the way I am around my kids. That is the way I am around my spouse. That's the way I am around my friends. That's the way I am around coworkers. It's anybody that has worked with me. Everybody that has worked with me were surprised that it lasted a year. Let's put
Right.
it that way, because
I told people briefly, like back probably 5, 6 episodes ago, I said, if you think this version of me on my podcast is bad, imagine what I'm like when I'm alone with my four brothers or one of my buddies. Like,
yes, yeah,
you've no idea. Like, this gets way worse.
yes, it
Like,
can get worse, yeah,
like I've grown up with those guys, and most of them are like teenagers now. It's like, trust me,
yes, yeah.
the shit that we say to each other is
Oh
pretty
yeah,
rough. Like,
it could it
the
get it could get more rough.
yeah, the concept of like, again, it goes back to this idea that like the media idea of like how people are, and this
Yeah.
public persona of how people are supposed to act and treat people. It's like,
Oh
fuck all of
yes.
that. Like, and the people who say today, fuck that, I'm not being involved,
Yeah.
those are the people who are going to be looked at as the winners in the future in my eyes, because it's like, well, you're going to be looked at as like this sort of 1984 presence looming over everybody's thought patterns and the way that they speak in society. If you think
Yeah.
you're going to look like the good guy coming out of that, I'd tell you to pick up a history book. Like, it's like
yes.
you
Yeah.
don't come out looking like the good guy. Like.
Yeah. yeah. No, I mean, at the end, I would rather be dead. I would rather be
Yeah,
dead than anybody control me. And
yeah.
that's, for some people, it sounds insane, and people have told me that I am insane that way. It's like, well, why? Like, I'm literally saying that. That's why I said that in that short in the short rebuttal that I made. I said, if you wanna silence me, you're just gonna have to kill me. That's really the only way to do it, because there is nothing that you could take away from me that's gonna make me be quiet. I'm going to say things until death, and so it's like, yeah, and that's why the way that is going right now, I will get the last word, and if they want to keep going, I'm just gonna make it get uglier. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of this we have no incentive to not speak up at this point. Yeah, and that's sort of where I'm pointing to, is like the cultural
Yeah.
side of this. Is like, eventually you're going to get a point where, like, okay, so put it out this way. Like, I am somebody who comes from like, I was raised Jewish, like that's my
Hmm.
religious upbringing, but now today I consider myself sort of more in the religious spiritual category. And I know people hate hearing the word spiritual. What I mean by
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
really that I believe there's a higher power, but I'm more into the ancient civilization outlook, the older religions that come before a lot of the stuff that people
Yeah, yeah.
practice. And so for me, it's like, well, it sort of goes like, my grandmother is a pagan and she's been a pagan as long as I've known her. And so she talks
Oh
about a lot of
wow.
the
Okay.
old world, like that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
those religions, which a lot of people disagree with now, especially that I meet in the like Catholic space and
Hmm.
that kind of thing, which I understand obviously, but it's like, yeah, it's sort of like, I don't know. I think for me, I've always taken religion to whatever the oldest form is. So I've said, okay, if it's like this is what I'm looking at, I'm going to look for whatever the oldest writings are
Mm,
from
that's
before,
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
which is
Because
something that
it's going to be the most authentic form of it, of whatever
well,
it is. Yeah.
and that's sort of where it becomes, for me, I've sort of more, I guess, recently been interested in like the north side of paganism and more of that sort of stuff. There's a lot of
Yeah.
those types up here in Alaska and stuff, so there's a lot of literature about it and stuff, and I that stuff interests me. But to be honest with you, what I end up finding myself doing with most religious stuff is just learning an awful lot about it and then moving on to the next one. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's more of a knowledge thing to me than it is a like faith in a way. And so
Yeah.
I've made more of the spiritual aspect of it where I say that is it's like, well, because I recognize that I'm a guy and I'm
Yeah.
relatively small in the working cogs of the machine that is the universe. And so
Yeah.
like there has to be something else there. Now whether
Yeah.
it's a single person or a force of sense, that kind of thing, I think gets into muddier waters and it gets into sort of where like all these different religions come from and how this stuff comes into the human mind to begin with. Like how do we even
Yes.
think up these sort of ideas? Does it come from somebody who brings it to us or did it come naturally? Is there some kind of and so that's the stuff that I more philosophically start talking about, and that's sort of where I trail off to. But it's like I look at today and it's like philosophically no one's even talking about religion anymore. Like
No,
they're not
right.
even
Yeah.
talking about like I can at least admit that I've examined what is out there and gone, well, there's got to be something else here that we don't see. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I look at people who go, no, man, it's all science, or no, man, it's all this thing. And I go, well, you're just like, you're not looking at the big picture here. Cause like
Yeah.
I've gone on some pretty deep hallucinogenic experiences, like shit like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that ain't the same as what you're smoking. Like
Yeah.
there's something different going on there.
Yeah.
Same thing with people where it's like I've known people who have had really deep sort of spiritual awakenings where they've come to faith, they've come to Catholicism, or they've
Mhm.
gone to becoming Christians because they literally woke up in the middle of the night having a dream. Like so, it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's something going on there. Like there's
Yeah.
something happening that is in the human condition that's creating that. It doesn't just come from nowhere. Like
Right. Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
so whether it's a divine being put in there or sort of an evolutionary thing, it's like well, it doesn't really matter. It's there. Like
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's part of the human condition. Yeah.
it's at least present. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and I think it's made manifest even with the secularists who really, the leftist worldview, it does become religious, and at least in the
yeah,
way it is
absolutely.
practiced. Yeah, like you're right that they're not positing anything, in terms of God, but at least in practice, that part of the human condition still gets manifest, and they still require, like
And the
the,
thing that
the
pisses me off the
characters and everything.
most
Yeah,
is that there's nothing new.
there isn't. Yes,
It's
yeah, yeah,
nothing. It's just the same shit over and over again. It's like, okay,
yeah,
but like we've had new religions. Like there's you can be
yes,
into
yeah,
this whole Zenu thing. You can go float around with the Scientologists. You could get into Mormonism, whatever.
right,
But
yeah,
like this is like take it back. Remove the Bible from the conversation. Like before that existed, like go back
yes,
2,500, 3,000 years ago when stuff was being exchanged orally or whatever the situation may be.
yeah,
it's like this had to have come from somewhere. Like, where do
Yes,
you
yeah.
literally think that a bunch of guys were ooga boogieing in a cave and just went, "I guess we believe in Jesus now"? Like, it's like, well, no,
Yes,
that
yeah,
that
yeah.
came from somewhere. It's like the same
Yeah.
with a bunch of Hindus up in the mountains chanting and putting wet
Exactly,
blankets
yeah.
on each other. Like, that had to have come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's more of where I become interested in stuff where I'm like, okay, you start looking at this and it's like, well, all these faiths have sort of these interlinking qualities, like that
Yeah.
come from human nature, come from something that we do as humans. Like, it's like, well, you shouldn't kill. Well, yeah, but you should kill if it's self-defense. Like, well, that's fleshed out pretty easily. Like,
Yeah.
if you really want to talk, like, you go back to history. Like, yes, somebody walks up and hits you with a rock, you're gonna assume you have the right to hit them with the rock back. Like, it's
Yes,
just like
yeah.
it's just gonna be human instinct, and at some point, it's just gonna be ingrained in you as a person.
Yeah.
So this idea that it like just manifested it at some point, it's like, well, no, that doesn't really make sense. Like, it's just like, and I see so
Right.
many people on the left, like, they try to tie this all into science. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, there's also all these events that happen that you can't really explain through this like small
Yes,
world
yeah.
view of like, well, test tubes and particles flying through an infinite pool of primordial ooze, and it just sort of happens. And
Yes,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, but no, it doesn't. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing. It doesn't happen. Like, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there has to be sort of this other node, and for me, that has become like the sort of bridging of that gap where I'm like, well, no, obviously there's some intelligence to science. Like, there's some
Hmm.
intrinsic qualities that can be brought up, especially of the methods behind it. And then you go, well, there's also some pretty good things that can be drawn from religion and some intrinsic qualities that can be brought from really all of them. Like, even
Hmm.
singling out like Muslims, which I have the most disdain for as far as their religious belief.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Um, Even they have some decent ideas. Like, it's not like it's all bad.
Of course, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So it's like, it's sort of this thing where you go, yeah, well, if you go back to like when people were just shamans and like
Hmm.
guys in small villages, smearing paint on their face and stuff, it's like that version of religion. It's like that's sort of what bore out this context of these prophesizers, these people who could bring forth these words of intelligence to people, which is sort of how I view like these ideas of the words of gospel, these bringing forth.
Hmm.
It's like, well, no, it's like when I look at the Enlightenment, I look at things like that. Like, it's the same thing. It's just that
Yes, yeah.
somebody finally took these ideas, took these beliefs, these core tenets, and put them in one place for people to absorb. And that's
Yeah.
really what the powerful thing is showing you that, like, if you have a bunch of people and they put their heads together, their psychological willpower, physical being is so powerful they can create an entire generational movement that lasts thousands and thousands and thousands of years and perpetually builds upon itself and brings forward what a lot of religion did, which is sort of ideas that keep the world together. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
things that keep you from killing your neighbor and, like, stealing his wife. Like, that kind of shit.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And a lot of times, also just basic philosophical axioms to derive ideas. And I think that that's what's kind of what the difficulty is in our current system right now is that we just don't have that. There's nothing unified in terms of what are the building blocks of reality. We just don't. There's nothing really agreed upon anymore, and we have just such a hodgepodge of at least within countries like ours, and many countries in the West are similar to ours. The ones that are less homogenous, but normally homogenous societies, if you go like to Japan, they have a unified um, axioms of what to build your understanding of reality on.
yeah, they
And
also have hentai, though.
yes, yeah. Oh no, yes, I know that. Yes. Yeah.
I had to do that. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, no, that's good. You got me there. I wasn't expecting that. Um, but yeah, and so it's like we just don't really have that anymore. And I think we kind of loosely did. I mean, the U.S. was a Protestant puritanical world. From its very origin, and there was other like deists, and there was a little bit. I mean,
Well, I
like
mean,
the
you were just talking briefly ago about natural law. And it's like,
yes, yeah,
well,
yeah,
yeah, Aquinas and Locke pretty much
yes,
make up the bulk of everything we have. Like
yes, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's just the borderline. Like there's Jefferson taking their ideas and sort of
yeah, it
making them
is.
modernized, like
Yes, yeah.
with a little bit of Franklin and Adams sprinkled in for no reason. But it is
Yes,
what it
yeah,
is.
but it's like the people ever since at least probably earlier, but you would see at least widespread in the 1950s and 60s was the early rejection of the natural law,
Right.
and it just became what are they going to be basing off of, and then everything just became some kind of hodgepodge of almost a like if you could describe the kind of mess we are right now, it's almost like a Manichaean dualism mixed with like Stuart Mill's utilitarianism.
To take a writer who I don't even think argued these points, it's almost sort of
Yes.
to what Spooner put forward, where you're
Yes,
like,
yeah.
yeah, the Constitution has no authority. The Constitution was bore out of these ideas. If you believe this, then the reason that failed is natural law. It's
Yes,
because you
yeah.
didn't put your faith into the system that was before, you put your faith into a system that was new and shiny.
Yes,
And
yeah,
that
yeah.
new and shiny system was worse. It left you off with no power.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think we're really just in this chaotic position in which the modern world just seems insane, and I think it seems insane because it is. I think
Yeah.
it really has
It
gone
really
mad.
is a clown world. Like I see people use that phrase, and I've used it
Yeah.
in my thumbnails occasionally. I'm like, no, but it literally is. Like I mean this literally. Like we're
Yes. Yeah.
living in a world where people could put on a red nose and white makeup and a
Yeah.
big furry fucking afro colorful wig and walk out on stage, and you would be forced to take them seriously. And if you
Yes. Yeah.
didn't, you would be canceled, you would be stripped
Yeah.
of your rank, and you would be ridiculed. Like
Yeah.
that's the world we're living in. Like
Yeah.
it that's fucking I mean, like the level of which you go like if I had a fucking time machine, the people I would bring into this century to just point and laugh would be
Yes. Yeah.
so that would be the most fun I would have. I'd be okay with dying after
Yes.
that. Just give me the ability to do this. Like
I, I think many of them just wouldn't believe it.
shipping Thomas Aquinas back to meet the current pope. We'll see what he
Yes.
thinks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Some tells me he's gonna have some problems. Like that's just my own
Yes. Yeah.
personal thing. Like,
It's the way that the yeah. No, that's true.
like that's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. It's like
Yeah.
it's cultural decay from every angle. It's not just in politics and
Oh
this is
yeah.
why I tell people it's like it is true. It just is that politics are downstream from culture.
Yeah.
Like it is a fact at this point. We've seen it happen in real time. Like anybody I lived through the gay marriage debate. Like I people
Yes.
in
Yeah.
my generation are the ones who were just below the voting age when that stuff was being decided on. I watched in real time as
Yeah.
people were telling us it's just a debate about people getting married. And I went, yeah, but isn't that kind of like the government getting involved in marriage, which is what the left was against? Like,
Yeah.
aren't you sort of just buying into the thing you were literally ramping and talking about demolishing? Like, and
Yeah.
then what do they do? Well, they sign this thing in and they say, well, don't worry, it's not going to affect culture. It's like, bullshit. Like, it was instantaneous. Like,
It
and
was.
I
Yeah.
thought as a young person growing up and like everybody talks about like modern wave feminism and what it's done to the dating pool. I'm somebody who's 23 and it's like I have a decent paying job. I'm not good
Mhm.
looking by any means of the standard, but it's like I I've been involved in the sort of light work dating scene that exists in this day and age, and it's like I have no interest in that. Like
Yeah.
that is this idea that we're all gonna get on apps and like scroll through each other's photos and like that's how you're deciding who you're gonna meet up with. It's like I this is like this is culture decay. Like
It
you're
is.
actively actively participating in the fall of Rome.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like I am not interested in that horse shit. Like, it's just not like I don't see the value in literally like standing in the corner while the fucking volcano erupts masturbating. Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't like I don't know. I'd sort of rather run around with my head cut off like a chicken than do that. Like
Yes, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. No, I agree with you there.
it's
Uh,
sort of I like to use a little bit of comedic innuendo to lighten the mood, but it is like it is the situation we're in. It's like it is really that we're like sort of watching all this stuff happen, and there are people who realize how to solve it. I would say me and you are two of them. There are
yeah,
hundreds of thousands of others who we could pick out of a pool who could probably solve all of these problems. But the
yeah.
reality is, all of those people are just screaming and yelling into a void. Like there's
Right.
no there's no stopping this. Like everybody talks about black pill, white pill, and I have a video that I've sort of half written about that context where I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, but like put the pills away. Like there's reality. Like look around you. Like this is what's happening. Like
yeah,
there's the rot that has existed in the country for well, really since Hamilton came, knocking.
yeah,
But
yeah,
really, I mean, as a Americana culture, really since Vietnam, that has
yeah,
rotted this country from the outside in. And that's the communism and the red shit, the
yeah,
Hollywood sort of faculty that latched on through the communistic era of the 50s and 40s, and what that did to our sort of system, Marxism becoming like a real actual thing that people are having to talk about in politics. That's insane.
yeah. I
Like, like
know.
what are we in the 19 fucking 20s? Like, is this the like
Yeah,
is this Hayek and fucking Lord Maynard Keynes going at it again? Like, this doesn't make
right.
any
Yeah,
sense. Like, so the idea that we're back to having these debates, it really is like, oh fuck, like history really does repeat itself. Like, we're just sort of
yeah,
running in a circle, chasing our own tail of freedom. Like,
yeah,
and all the politicians, like, it's funny because you see so many of these people, and I've been to so many little random events and stuff where I've met bigwig politicians from other states and stuff, and it's like,
yeah.
you're really not smart. Like, I
No, I
just shook
know.
your
Yes,
hand,
yeah,
I had a conversation with you, and you are a bag of fucking rocks with a pair of lips attached to it. Like, I don't. Everything I said went over your head. You didn't like, and I know you were paying attention. Like, it's like
yeah,
'cause there are people I've met who it's like, and I don't like publicly because it's stuff that I'll eventually be involved in. It's like, but some of these people, I'm like, I don't. How did you get here? Like, maybe there really is somebody just pulling strings. Like at this point,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
to like get into that shit because it's like you have no charisma. You lack all like faculty. Is like I don't like. How does somebody like Joe Biden like think about
I
this?
know.
Like
Yeah,
Joe Biden is the president of the United States. The man just fell on air, like not on
again.
TV, but literally fell on nothing. Fell on air.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, I see
like
what you mean. Yes, yeah, yeah,
yeah, I mean, the guy's like, this is the person in charge of the free, quote unquote, free world. And it's like, I, like, and it's like, well, no, don't worry. We'll put Trump in charge. It's like, yeah, but he's
yeah,
like 82. Like,
yeah,
why are we, what are we doing? Like, we're putting we're just swapping one mummified human for another mummified human with spray tan. Like, it doesn't,
yeah,
like, I
yeah.
get that policies are better. I accept that. Like, just straight
Hmm.
up, I'll tell people, like, Trump
Yeah.
is better than Biden, period. If given the
Oh,
two
yeah.
options, I'll
He's
vote
more
for Trump.
entertaining.
But if given those two options, I just won't vote. Like, that's just
Yeah,
my
yeah,
position. And there isn't an LP candidate I can really get behind. I talked about this publicly, and I'm one of the outspoken few on this. But
yeah.
Mike Dermott, who is, sort of the candidate being backed by a lot of the people I know right now in the LP, it's like Mike Dermott was a cop. If I'm not mistaken, he still is actively a cop. And I've made the
Oh,
point
okay.
many times, like, I don't think the guy running for president in the Libertarian Party should be a dude who literally took people's rights from them.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't like. That's kind of a bad look. And everybody's like, "Well, what would you do about a veteran?" I'm like, "Yeah, the same thing goes. Like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
want some guy who went and shot a bunch of little Asian guys during fucking Vietnam to be the fucking runner of the presidency for the Libertarian Party either. Like, I wouldn't
Right. Yeah,
support
because
either.
because it seems like their at least their actions are contrary to what the party stands
Your
for.
ethics are compromised, and my most important thing is principles. I mean, this is what I talk
Yeah.
about constantly. It's like the reason I'm a supporter of Ron Paul and the reason I'm a supporter of Joe Vogler as my two like primary political figures that I revere is it's like because for the most part neither of these guys ever wavered on anything they believed in. They're consistent through their entire, you know,
Yeah.
their entire existence as a politician.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like that is so absurdly rare. And I don't think people get how rare that is. It's like
Yeah.
you almost never find like, people and Ron Paul had some fuck ups, like he did. Um
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and Vogler had some opinions I don't like of his. I won't call them fuck ups, but it's like there's definitely, always going to be something that you don't like about somebody.
Right.
But
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
it's what they have that's good. You know, it's not
Yeah.
like all these people moved the political wheel forward for no reason. They obviously did something good.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yes. Yeah.
and Dunleavy's a perfect example of that. Like Dunleavy, to me, although some of the things he's done, I might not like. I think he could be a little harder on certain things, but it's like at the same time, I recognize how the political system works. So it's like
Right.
you you can be harder on things to an extent, but like at some point you're just like, I can't go any further now because there's this giant roadblock in front of me. You know,
Yeah.
in our case for Alaska, it's like, well, we kind of just allow the federal government to decide how we make money. Like, and I'm like, it'd be really nice if we had a governor that was just like, yeah, we're kind of done with that. like we're just gonna do it all and like build it all here. And that's something I think we really do need. Like when I say Alaska nationalism, I really do mean a guy who's willing to be like, no, like if you come into our state and try to do this, we're going to arrest you. Like
Right. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want
Go
to get you up
hardcore.
in cuffs and like we'll take this back to the Soapy Smith era. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you wanna get down to like that kind of stuff. And it's like I do think we need a revamp of that culture in the state.
Hmm.
Because like,
Yeah.
when my grandparents were here and stuff like that, it's like the Kobuk Valley Jade Company was a
Hmm.
massive company. I have sculptures from them and things.
Yeah.
They're right by Girdwood. They had a giant banner that hung out front of their business for 15 years. The
Yeah.
banner said Alaskans for Independence.
Hmm.
And that sign did not go down until the early 90s when
Yeah.
Vogler had passed away and everything sort of slowed down on that end. Um, and looking back, I'm like, if that guy hadn't have kicked it the way he had, and that movement had kept rolling,
Yeah.
they would have been the challengers for the Republican candidates. Like,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be no Democratic Party in this state. It wouldn't have existed. Like,
Yes.
and looking at reality, I can go, well, isn't that sort of perfect? Like, if your
Yeah.
two candidates were the Republicans and even more based versions of the Republicans, you'd sort of be in hog heaven. Like you can't
Yeah.
get any
Yeah.
better. So it's like, that's like, yeah, just do that again.
Yeah.
I'm looking at all the like political stuff around it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't like. Sure, the media's gonna hate you. Everybody's gonna attack you, but they're gonna do that anyway. Like the
Yeah.
second
I
you
know.
go
Yeah.
up against anything they don't believe in, so it's like at that point you might as well just balls the wall to begin with. Like
Yeah.
say all this shit out loud. Like, I mean, it becomes sort of a thing where I'm like, Vogler has this quote where it's like, the fires of hell are frozen glaciers compared to my hatred for the American government. And after that, Vogler stated that he would not be buried on American soil. He'd be buried in Dawson, Canada. And when Alaska was an independent nation, you could bring his bones home. And that's
Oh
where he was
wow.
buried. He was buried in
Hmm.
Dawson. He was not buried in
Yeah.
Alaska. And when you hear somebody say that, and like in Vogler's case, this is a guy who had went all the way to the Alaska Supreme Court. He had fought for miners' rights in the state of Alaska during a time where the miners were being stripped of all their ability to do anything.
Yeah.
And he wasn't targeting the state, he was targeting the federal government. And it's like, yeah, this is like everything we should be doing now. Like, we should
Yeah.
all still be. Like, if you had a dozen versions of him in the modern age, we'd all be fucking fine. Like,
Yeah.
like you could just replicate that dude and drop him in a bunch of states. The problem would be solved. It'd just take 10 years. Like, just sit
Yeah.
back and wait. But I don't want to keep you too long. This is sort of where I normally I keep
Yeah. No
things
problem.
around an hour and a half, so this is about perfect. I guess plug your show obviously for anybody who's watching this or
Yeah.
watches this that hasn't seen you, and then anything you want to close out with, anything like that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, our show is Contra Gentiles. We put an episode out a week. We actually are looking to ramp up in the next few months to do on and off daily episodes. So probably he's going to take up about 3 days, and I'll to do 3 days and
Are,
different content.
I don't want to
And
interrupt, but
mhm.
are you guys in Anchorage, or do you live in the Bay?
He is. I'm in the valley. So
Okay, so
he's in
you're
Eagle River, and I'm in Wasilla.
dude. I should next time I have the opportunity, it would be cool to do like a live show in Anchorage. That would be a blast.
We definitely should.
Because I'm not like it's not so insane to drive. Like
Yes, yeah, yeah. And I have my studio in Anchorage, and so that's where we've been doing it. But right now, I'm kind of renovating a lot.
I saw
Um,
that. I liked your lighting setup in there.
yeah. And so we're probably going to do go back to that again in a month or two when everything I have everything set up again. But I'm just it's just a lot of renovation that's happening, and yeah, and so we will hopefully be doing more, and then yeah, I guess just for closing out, I just think that what you're doing, I think what a lot of other people are doing is it's really important to always keep the conversation going, and so that's what I would say. It might feel small when you're doing it, even if you only have a few hundred listeners or even just a few thousand listeners. But I do think it makes a difference, and I do think it's something that we always have to just
Well,
just keep
you
that in
said
mind.
something on you guys said something on your show, the most recent episode, which I want everybody who listens to this to go listen to. Um, that I think resonated with me, which is you were talking about how you were talking in the context of religion, but you had
Yeah,
people who had reached out to you, and that had really affected the way that you guys looked at the outlook of the show. And it's like, well, I've done enough public events that I've had a few people come up to me and be like, yeah, I watch your show every time you do it. Like, I
yeah,
like your politics. I like the way you cover things, and like, I don't really care about this side of things, but I like this. And it's like to me, that's what this stuff is being done for. Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah,
sort of the Louis Ling, uh, the anarchist. He
yeah,
killed himself in his cell and everything, but he said in his speech before he was sentenced to death, he goes, it's not me who you should be worried about. It's the hundreds of thousands of people who will throw the bombs after me. And it's sort of that
yeah,
concept. It's like, it's that rolling hill, concept. It's like the guys who are tiny, who are talking about this stuff now, are the people who are going to get this ball rolling.
yes,
And
yeah.
they're going to pass it along to people who do much bigger things.
Yes, yeah, definitely. All right, yeah, I think that's a good way to end it.
Perfect. Thank you for talking. This
All
was
right.
great.